Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the alien standing in her ship's meeting room. The creature looked like a mix between a bird and a lizard, with scales that shimmered in colors she had no names for. Its name was Creether, and it was the first alien humanity had ever met. "You must prepare your temples," Creether said, its voice coming through the translator as a soft whistle. "The dragon will arrive in 6 of your months. Your species must be ready to pledge loyalty." Elena exchanged glances with her first officer, Marcus Webb. They had prepared for many scenarios when they left Earth to explore the stars. Meeting aliens who talked about dragons and temples was not one of them. "I'm sorry," Elena said carefully. "Can you explain what you mean by dragon?" Creether's head tilted in what might have been confusion. "You do not know of the dragons? The eternal ones? The gods who shape the stars. We don't have dragons on Earth," Marcus said. "Just stories about them. Made-up creatures from old books." The alien made a sound like breaking glass. It took a moment for Elena to realize it was laughing. "You think the dragons are stories? Oh, young species. You have much to learn." Over the next hour, Creether explained the way the galaxy worked. At the top were the dragons, beings of immense power who had ruled for millions of years. They were not many, perhaps a few hundred spread across the galaxy, but each one was powerful enough to destroy planets. Every intelligent species in the galaxy worshipped them, built temples to them, offered them gifts and service. "This is simply how things are," Creether said. "The strong rule. The wise serve. Your world lies in the territory of Azrath, the Infinite. He will come to accept your worship. You should feel honored." Elena felt her jaw tighten. "And what if we don't want to worship him?" The room went very quiet. Creether's scales lost their shimmer, fading to a dull gray. "You cannot mean that." "No species refuses the dragons. It would be death." "We've never been good at bowing," Marcus muttered. Creether stood abruptly. "I must report this conversation. Perhaps your leaders will have more wisdom." "For your sake, I hope so." Azrath does not tolerate disrespect. After the alien left, Elena sat in silence with her crew. Finally, Marcus spoke. "So, dragons are real, and one is coming to make us worship it." "Apparently," Elena said. "What do we do?" Elena thought about Earth, about all the people living their lives without knowing what was coming. She thought about the history books she'd read as a child, full of tyrants and empires that demanded submission. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting against those who claimed the right to rule by strength alone. "We do what humans always do," she said. "We tell them no." The message Elena sent back to Earth caused panic at first, then anger, then something more dangerous: determination. The United Nations held emergency sessions. Every major nation contributed scientists, engineers, soldiers. If a dragon was coming, humanity would be ready. Dr. James Chun led the scientific team studying everything Creether had told them about dragons. The alien had been surprisingly willing to share information, perhaps thinking it would encourage submission. Instead, it gave humanity something to work with. They're not actually gods, Chum told the UN Security Council 3 months after first contact. Creether's descriptions make that clear. They're biological creatures, incredibly advanced, but they follow physical laws. They manipulate energy in ways we don't understand yet, but everything can be understood. "Can they be killed?" asked General Sarah Morrison. Chun hesitated. "Creether says no species has ever managed it. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It might just mean no one has tried hard enough." Around the world, factories shifted production. Weapons were designed, tested, and redesigned. Humanity had 6 months to prepare for something they didn't fully understand. It wasn't enough time. It would have to be enough anyway. Meanwhile, other alien species heard about humanity's refusal to submit. Most thought humans were insane. A few thought they were admirably brave. All of them agreed humans would be dead within days of Azrath's arrival. The Voth sent a delegation to Earth, begging humanity to reconsider. "We resisted once," their leader said, a being that looked like flowing water in a vaguely humanoid shape. 3 billion of our people died before we surrendered. You cannot win. The dragons are eternal. How long ago did you fight them? Elena asked. 12,000 years. And in those 12,000 years, did you ever try again? The Voth's form rippled with what might have been shame. No, we learned our lesson. Maybe, Elena said. You learned the wrong lesson. As the deadline approached, Earth's orbital space filled with weapons platforms, ships, and desperate hope. Humanity had done the math. They couldn't match a dragon's power. But power wasn't everything. A mouse couldn't match a human's strength either. But throughout history, the small and clever had found ways to hurt the large and strong. On the last day before Azrath's arrival, Elena stood in the command center of the orbital station Defiance, looking at Earth turning slowly below. Somewhere down there were her parents, her sister, her nephews. Somewhere down there were 8 billion people who voted to fight rather than kneel. All ships report ready, Marcus said from his console. Elena took a deep breath. In a few hours, they would meet a god. They would look it in the eye and refuse to bow. They might die for it. Probably would die for it. But they would die free. Good, Elena said. Let's show this dragon what humans think of gods. Azrath arrived exactly on schedule, appearing at the edge of Earth's solar system in a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun. Even from millions of kilometers away, the sensors could barely process what they were seeing. The dragon was 3 kilometers long from nose to tail, covered in scales that seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy. It had wings that stretched across space itself and eyes that burned with the light of dying stars. Where it moved, reality bent and twisted like water around a stone. Contact in 6 hours at current speed, Marcus reported, his voice steady despite the readings flooding his screen. It's not slowing down. Elena watched the dragon approach on the main display. Part of her, the part that was still just a human looking at something impossible, wanted to run. Wanted to hide. Wanted to do anything except stand in front of that thing and say no. She thought about Krether's words. The strong rule. The wise serve. All stations, prepare to engage, she said. Azrath's voice filled every radio channel, every speaker, every communication device in the solar system. It didn't speak words so much, push thoughts directly into their minds. The sensation made Elena's head ache. Small things. I am Azrath the Infinite. I have come to receive your worship. Kneel. And I will be merciful. Resist, and I will show you why galaxies tremble at my name. Elena opened a channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. Her voice would reach not just Azrath, but every alien ship watching from a safe distance, waiting to see Earth die. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of Earth. We've received your message. Here's ours. No. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Azrath laughed, and the sound was like solar flares and breaking planets. You dare? You, who've barely left your world. I have ended species older than your sun. I have broken empires that span star clusters. What makes you think you can defy a god? We've met gods before, Elena said. We stopped believing in them. Then you will learn to believe again. The dragon accelerated, closing the distance in seconds. Earth's outer defense platforms opened fire. Railguns hurled projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missiles equipped with nuclear warheads streaked toward their target. Laser arrays designed to cut through asteroids focused on a single point. Azrath flew through it all like it wasn't there. The railgun slugs passed through him as if he wasn't solid. The missiles exploded harmlessly against some kind of barrier. The lasers bent away, redirected by the warping space around his body. "Phase 2, Elena ordered, her voice calm despite the fear clawing at her chest. The real weapons activated. Dr. Chun had spent 6 months studying everything they knew about how dragons manipulated reality. He couldn't match their power, but he'd found something interesting. Dragons didn't break physical laws. They bent them, used quantum principles humans were just beginning to understand. And anything that could be bent could be exploited. The Prometheus lances fired. They didn't shoot bullets or energy beams. Instead, they created cascading disruptions in the exotic matter dragons used to sustain their power. It was like pulling the foundation out from under a building. Azeroth screamed. The sound tore across radio waves and through the vacuum of space itself. For the first time in millions of years, the dragon felt pain. His scales flickered, losing their dimensional shimmer. Blood, if it could be called blood, leaked from a wound along his side, evaporating into rainbow mist. "It worked!" Someone shouted in the command center, but Azeroth was far from defeated. The dragon's eyes blazed with fury, and he struck back. One of the orbital platforms simply ceased to exist, unmade at the quantum level. A fleet of defense ships crumpled like paper in a child's fist. The moon's surface cracked as a stray blast hit it, creating a new crater visible from Earth. "Keep firing," Elena commanded. "Hit him again." More lances activated. More wounds appeared on the dragon's body. But Azeroth was learning, adapting, shifting the way he manipulated space to minimize the damage. And for every wound they gave him, he destroyed another piece of humanity's defense. The battle raged for hours. Mars lost its orbital stations. Earth's atmosphere glowed with the heat of debris burning up on re-entry. Millions died as cities were hit by falling wreckage. The dragon was bleeding from a dozen wounds, but humanity was running out of weapons. Elena watched the tactical display with growing desperation. They'd heard him, proven he could be heard, but it might not be enough. Azeroth was too strong, too fast, too experienced at war. "Captain," Marcus said quietly, "the Valiant is ready." Elena looked at him. The Valiant was their last hope, a prototype dreadnought equipped with every Prometheus lance they could fit into one ship. It was also a suicide mission. Someone had to get close enough to deliver the full payload, and at that range, there would be no escape. "I'll take her out," Elena said. "Like hell you will," Marcus replied. "You're needed here. I've already transferred my command codes." "Marcus, that's an order, Captain." He smiled, the same easy smile he'd worn since they were young officers together. "Besides, someone needs to live to tell the story. Make sure they spell my name right." Before Elena could argue, Marcus was gone, running toward the hangar bay. She watched on the screens as the Valiant launched, a single ship accelerating toward a god. Azeroth saw him coming and laughed. "One small creature thinks to challenge me alone." "Not alone," Marcus broadcast. "Never alone." Every remaining human ship followed the Valiant, forming a spear pointed at the dragon's heart. They knew most of them would die. They came anyway. The final assault was chaos. Ships exploded. The dragon's roars shook space itself. And through it all, Marcus flew the Valiant closer, until he was near enough to see the hatred in Azeroth's burning eyes. "For Earth," Marcus whispered, and fired every weapon at once. The Prometheus lances tore reality apart. Azeroth's scream was a sound no human could describe. His body convulsed, his wings shredded, his scales cracking and falling away. And then, impossibly, the dragon turned and fled, limping away into deep space, trailing energy and disbelief behind him. The battle was over. Humanity had survived, and a god had run away. Marcus Chen died 3 days after the battle. The Valiant had taken too much damage during the final assault. life support failing in the long hours it took to limp back to Earth. He held on just long enough to dock. Just long enough to see his brother's face one more time. "We made it," Dr. James Chun whispered. Holding his brother's hand in the medical bay, Marcus smiled weakly. "Course we did. Humans are stubborn like that." His eyes focused on something far away. "Did we really make a god bleed?" "You made him run," James said. "That's better." Marcus died with that smile still on his face. They gave him a funeral with full military honors, broadcast across Earth and to every human ship and station. He was the first, but not the last. The final count came to 4 million dead, with cities damaged across 3 continents and orbital infrastructure in ruins. But humanity had done the impossible, and the galaxy was watching. Elena stood at the UN headquarters 3 weeks later, still wearing her uniform, still carrying the weight of everyone who died under her command. The room was packed with representatives from 100 alien species, all demanding to know the same thing. "How did you do it?" Creether asked. The alien's scales were bright with excitement now, no longer the dull gray of fear. "How did you wound a dragon?" "We studied them," Elena said simply. "We learned. We refused to accept that power made them unbeatable." "But no one has ever hurt a dragon before," a Voth representative said. "We tried. We failed. We thought it was impossible." "When did you try?" Dr. Chun asked from his seat beside Elena. "And after you failed, did you keep studying them? Keep learning? Keep trying new approaches?" The Voth's water form rippled with discomfort. "No, we accepted our place." "That was your mistake," Chun said. "You treated them as gods, so you stopped looking for their weaknesses. But they're not gods. They're just very powerful biological creatures. And anything biological can be hurt." The room erupted in excited chatter. Representatives clustered in groups, arguing in dozens of languages. Finally, a Centauri elder spoke, its crystalline body chiming like bells. "You will share this technology? These Prometheus lances?" Elena looked at the alien, at all the aliens, and remembered Creether's words from 6 months ago. The strong rule. The wise serve. "Yes," she said. "We'll share everything." The dragons ruled through fear, by making you think resistance was impossible. We just proved it's not. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. She paused, then added, "But if you want our advice, stop worshipping them. Start fighting them." The galaxy did exactly that. The first rebellion started on Creether's homeworld. They demolished their temples to Azeroth, melting down the precious metals to build weapons instead. When another dragon came to demand an explanation, they fought back using modified Prometheus lances. They lost, but they made the dragon bleed before they fell. Other species saw it and drew courage. The Voth rebuilt their weapons research centers, closed for 12,000 years. The Centauri turned their hymns from praise into battle songs. Across 1,000 worlds, species that had bowed for millions of years stood up and said no. The dragons, comfortable in their worship for so long, were caught completely unprepared. They'd spent eons being treated as gods, never having to truly fight. Now they faced coordinated resistance from prey that had learned to bite back. But dragons were still incredibly dangerous, and they were furious at humanity for starting the rebellion. Every human ship, every human colony became a target. Azeroth, humiliated by his retreat, became obsessed with destroying Earth. "He's coming back," Marcus Webb said, promoted to Marcus's old position after the battle. "Intel shows he's gathering strength, preparing for a second attack." Elena nodded. She'd expected this. Wounded pride was a dangerous thing, especially in a creature that had ruled for millions of years. "How long do we have?" 3 months. Maybe 4. Then we better be ready. Earth rebuilt faster than anyone thought possible. New weapons platforms went up. New ships were built incorporating everything they'd learned from the first battle. And this time, they had help. The Kree sent ships. The Voth sent engineers. The Centauri sent something stranger, crystalline matrices that amplified the Prometheus Lance's effects. "We're stronger together," Kreither said, watching the joint fleet assemble in Earth's orbit. "The dragons kept us separated, made us worship alone. Perhaps they knew this would happen if we ever united." "Probably," Elena agreed. "Tyrants always fear what happens when their victims start talking to each other." The battle, when it came, was even more brutal than the first. Azrath had learned too, adapted his defenses, brought weapons he'd kept in reserve. The dragon tore through the defense fleet like a storm, and this time he was aiming to kill not just soldiers, but the entire planet. "He's going for Earth directly," Webb shouted over the alarms. "He's going to crack the planet open." Elena made a decision she'd hoped never to make. "Evacuate the command center? I'm taking the Defiance down to meet him." "Captain, the station isn't designed for atmospheric entry." "I know." She looked at her crew, the people she'd served with through fire and war. "Anyone who wants to leave, go now. No judgment." "But I'm staying." No one left. Elena flew the massive orbital station directly into Earth's atmosphere, using its thrusters to aim at Azrath like a bullet. The metal screamed as it heated. Systems failed one by one, but they kept going, kept accelerating, until they were close enough to see the dragon's eyes, close enough to see the recognition in them, the knowledge that he'd made a mistake. "From Marcus," Elena whispered, and fired everything. The explosion lit up the sky from pole to pole. When the light faded, Azrath was falling, his wings torn, his body broken in a dozen places. He crashed into the Pacific Ocean, creating a tidal wave that would be remembered for generations. The dragon tried to rise one more time, fury and disbelief warring in his dying eyes. Then his body gave out, and Azrath, the Infinite, who had ruled for 1,000,000 years, died in Earth's ocean. Elena and her crew never made it out of the Defiance. The station broke apart on impact, scattering across 300 kilometers of atmosphere. There were no survivors, but there were witnesses. Every species in the galaxy saw a human station fall from the sky to kill a god. The war that followed lasted 17 years. It wasn't one war, really, but hundreds of smaller battles fought across the galaxy as species rose up against their dragon overlords. Some worlds won their freedom quickly. Others burned before they could break their chains. But the tide had turned, and everyone knew it. Dr. James Chun, now old and tired, stood in a laboratory on Mars, looking at data from the latest battle reports. Each dragon that fell gave them more information, more understanding of how these creatures worked. The knowledge came at a terrible price, paid in lives and destroyed worlds, but it came nonetheless. "We've confirmed 43 dragon deaths," his assistant said. "A young Kree named Sharik. Another 71 have retreated to the galactic core. The remaining ones are scattered, trying to hold individual territories." "How many species have joined the rebellion?" "All of them, Doctor. Every single intelligent species in the galaxy is either fighting or preparing to fight." Chun nodded slowly. His brother Marcus had died in the first battle. Captain Vasquez had died in the second. The list of names went on, carved into memorial walls across human space. Sometimes he wondered if freedom was worth the cost. Then he remembered what Kreither had told them at that first meeting. The strong rule. The wise serve. A galaxy where billions lived on their knees, where children were born into worship of creatures who saw them as property. Yes, he thought. It was worth it. The final push came in the 17th year of the war. The dragons had retreated to a cluster of ancient systems near the galactic core, where they'd first evolved millions of years ago. Here they made their last stand, 63 dragons fighting together for the first time in recorded history. The Allied fleet that faced them was the largest military force ever assembled. Humans flew alongside Kree, Voth, Centauri, and 100 other species. They had better weapons now, designed over 17 years of hard learning. They had strategy, coordination, and something the dragons had never bothered to develop: the ability to work together. The Battle of the Core lasted 6 months. It was brutal beyond measure. Entire ships were unmade. Stars flickered and died from the energies unleashed. But the dragons were fighting for pride, for a past they couldn't return to. The allied species were fighting for their children's freedom. One by one, the dragons fell. Some fought to the death. Others, seeing the end coming, fled to parts unknown. A few, surprisingly, surrendered, accepting imprisonment rather than extinction. When the last dragon weapon fell silent, when the last claim of divinity was answered with defiance, the galaxy finally went quiet. In that silence, a new age began. 20 years after humanity first met Kreether, a ceremony was held on Earth. Representatives from every species in the rebellion gathered to unveil a memorial. It stood in the exact spot where Azrath's body had crashed into the Pacific, now a protected site where the ocean had been drained and preserved. Kreether, now old by his species' standards, gave the opening speech. His scales had dimmed with age, but his voice was strong. "We built temples to dragons for millions of years," he said. "We carved their names in stone, sang their praises, offered them everything we had. They told us this was right and proper, that the strong ruled and the wise served. We believed them because we were afraid, and because we had forgotten how to be anything else." He paused, looking at the assembled crowd. Then one species who had never met a dragon before heard that message and said no. Not because they were stronger, not because they had better weapons, but because they had never learned to worship power. Kreether gestured to the memorial, which bore the names of every human who died in the wars. At the top, in letters large enough to read from orbit, were 2 names: Marcus Chen and Elena Vasquez. Humans taught us that gods are just powerful beings who convinced others to stop fighting. They taught us that questions are more dangerous to tyrants than weapons. They taught us that freedom is worth dying for. His voice softened. They taught us by dying for it, over and over, until we learned the lesson. Dr. James Chun, invited to speak next, walked slowly to the podium. He was 93 now, his hair white, his hands shaking. But his mind was still sharp, still asking questions, still refusing easy answers. "My brother died in the first battle," he began. "Captain Vasquez died in the second. 4 billion people died across all the wars that followed. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice, if maybe we should have just bowed and lived." He looked out at the crowd, at the mix of species who'd fought together, bled together. "But then I think about what we would have passed on to our children. A galaxy where might makes right, where the powerful can demand worship just because they're powerful, where asking why is considered blasphemy." Chun's voice grew stronger. "We didn't fight the dragons because we thought we'd win. We fought them because bowing to them would have killed something more important than our bodies. It would have killed the idea that every thinking being has the right to stand upright, to question authority, to choose their own path." He smiled, thinking of Elena's words from so long ago. "We've met gods before. We stopped believing in them, not because they weren't powerful, but because power doesn't make you worthy of worship. It just makes you powerful." The ceremony ended, but the work continued. The galaxy had to be rebuilt. Species that had spent millions of years in enforced hierarchy had to learn how to govern themselves. It wasn't easy. There were conflicts, mistakes, problems that couldn't be solved with weapons, but they were free problems, faced by free people, and that made all the difference. In a small museum on Earth, They preserved the original message Elena had sent to Azeroth, the words that had changed everything. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see it, to touch the display, to remember. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of Earth. We've received your message. Here's ours. No. One word. One simple, absolute word. The word that ended an age of gods and began an age of people. Creether visited the museum often in his final years. He would stand in front of that display for hours, his scales shimmering with colors that meant reverence in his species. But it wasn't worship. It was gratitude. Thank you, he would whisper to the empty room, to the memory of a woman who died before her time. Thank you for teaching us to say no. The galaxy moved on. New challenges arose. Old conflicts resurfaced without dragons to suppress them. Life was messy and complicated and free, and in the end, that was the real victory. Not that humanity had killed gods, but that they'd helped create a galaxy where no one needed to, where the strong didn't rule, where the wise didn't serve, where every being could stand up and say, if they chose that one beautiful, defiant word, no.